everybody, welcome to the Improv Network Podcast, a series of conversations aimed at making stronger connections through the improv community. I'm your host, Bob Wick. James cannot make it this week. He got a paid gig, so good on him. Today we got a very special guest, my man, Joe Rapp from the Bearded Company. How you doing, bud?
Doing great. Thanks for having me. I'm super excited about this.
I've been working on my intros. It's a bit between me and James, so he even wrote one down for me.
Wow.
So, yeah. That's my intro voice. It's really, it's out of 10. How you doing, man? How you been?
Doing well. I mean, it's, I think especially when it comes to the arts and improv in general, this last year has been a wild one.
Absolutely. I want to talk to you. The Bearded Company, you guys were at like the first diff. We've known each other, 12 years now?
I was going to say, yeah, about that. Yeah.
And there are so few diffs that you haven't been to. Like you're pretty much a Detroit you're one of our adopted troops, I would say.
Oh, we love it. Like it's like coming home when we end up in Detroit. We love that.
It is. It's like, like when you have like Thanksgiving, you get to see your cousins you haven't seen in a long time. That's exactly what it feels when you guys show up. So it's always a pleasure. But let's get into it. I want to talk about, how did you guys get started? First, personally, Joe, I've never asked you, how did you get started in improv?
Oh boy, I got started. I think like some people, like when I was in high school forever ago, like the late 90s, that was there was like improv at our high school, and I tried it and honestly hated it. And I just was like, forget this. I don't ever want to do this again. And I walked away from it. And then when I went to college, there was an improv group there that one of my roommates was a part of. And so I went to a few of their jams and I realized, oh, this is what improv is supposed to be. It's supposed to be like fun and loose. And it was just like, I don't know.
What was it like in high school?
I don't know. It just wasn't that. It felt really rigid and weird. And I think it's because the people that were running it didn't really understand what improv was.
Oh, was it other students or was
it so there was like, we had our like drama teacher. Mm-hmm. He brought it in as a way to make our acting better. But I don't think he fully understood what improv was. I think he just like looked it up and said, oh, improv, just no script. Yep. And then just like let us out there to do whatever. So there was like, it was kind of
wow. That's awesome though. God bless him for trying.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's good on him for giving it a shot. Yeah. But I was glad to get some structure once I actually went to college and got to meet up with a group where people were truly trying to understand the form.
All right. Cool. So where did that take you to?
So from there, basically that group, they kind of fell apart, and me and a couple of my buddies there were like, I bet we can start a group. Let's just try it. Let's just start holding some improv jams. And we did. We just started holding improv jams in our garage. And then we started holding them on campus because we were all theater majors. Right. And so we just started holding improv jams like once a week in the green room, and anyone could come, anyone could try stuff out. Cause we were pretty honest about like, we don't know everything. We're also learning here. Like we're just pulling exercises out of like Truth and Comedy and any other book we could get our hands on. Some like John Stone stuff. Yeah. I mean, it was wild.
There was only like 3 books back then. So
exactly. Truly. I mean, and we were like all into every book we could get because we were so far away from any improv, like real quote unquote improv city. Cause we were in, like on the border of Minnesota and North Dakota. And so there was no improv there. So it was just, you gotta read to learn it.
Wow. Okay, cool. Then how did you get to your first improv class and where was it at?
So from there, as that started, and once, what started basically from that was the Bearded Men, which is what we were before the Bearded Company. And when the Bearded Men started, we finally, from some of our jams, we created a smaller group of 7 of us. And then all of us were like, we should actually take like some real classes if we can. So we decided let's pool our money. Let's take a trip and go do an intensive down at Second City in Chicago. So we all went down and did a weekend intensive at Second City in Chicago. And that was our first like real dip into somebody else teaching us.
Do you remember what that felt like? Like the introduction to what real improv is compared to what you thought it was through reading?
I mean, weirdly, some of it was, I remember like when we first got in there and like the first couple of exercises, I was like, oh man, like I feel like we do this all the time. I don't want to do this again. But very quickly it became, holy crap, this is a lot. There's so much information coming at me. And the guy, I don't even remember who our teacher was, but I remember he was really great about stopping scenes and going, okay, let's stop and look at this and figure out what we're doing here. And it was just weird to have somebody truly on the outside that wasn't a part of our group, like stopping and starting stuff and kind of pointing out things. That was wild. Wow.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. When you coach, is that your style of coaching? Do you just stop scenes and...
I mean, sometimes it kind of depends. It depends on what I'm coaching specifically, but yeah, I do like, my personal opinion is I like giving people a little leeway. I like giving people the opportunity to go a little further than maybe some coaches do. I like letting people go further, and then we'll stop and we'll go, okay, let's all look at this together. Like, this isn't just me. Like, I want my students to always be able to also see it. Like, because until they see it, the change is not probably going to happen. Like, just because I'm telling them, like, once I leave the room, how do they know then? Like,
yeah. You can't be a crutch,
right?
You know?
Exactly.
Right. No, I'm with you on that. I like letting them get to not too far because you want them to remember what they were going through, you know.
Absolutely.
But like, you also, we're not psychic. They might have something under, like, because students do surprise you, so you can't act as if like, well, I'm senior improv in this room. I'm going to show you how to hold my hand. I'll take you through this.
Absolutely. I mean, honestly, in some students, like, you'll ask them a question of like, okay, so why did you choose to do this? And it's a completely different reason than like I had in my head of why they did it. And then I'm like, oh, now I get what you're trying to do. Okay, let's take that and let's just try something slightly different. Like, that's an awesome idea that I didn't even
How
get.
Can we communicate that to the audience?
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. So you guys take your intensive, you got the improv bug. What happens next?
From there, then we just started like pushing really hard to perform as often as we could. And so that took us, like, we were, thankfully, our campus was pretty good about letting us do stuff. So we were able to book one of the smaller theaters on campus pretty regularly to do shows. And we tried everything. When we were an early group, our first like year and a half, all we did was short form improv.
Wow.
So we did all game style improv for the first year and a half. And like, we learned every game we could, everything we could. And we tried we even did like a show that was like kind of a comedy sports ripoff show once, just to see what that was like.
Right.
And then for some reason we thought, we're like, you know, we had one person ask us, hey, can you perform at this event or whatever? I'm like, oh my God, let's try to make some money. And so me and my co-owner right now, Matt, he and I were like, let's make this a business. So we went and like got an LLC and did all this stuff to become a business. So it was very dumb.
I love that about you guys, because you know, as far as I'm concerned, like, you're one of the only troupes I know that are so organized. You're almost like the Wu-Tang Clan of improv. Like, you all have your equal parts. You know what job you bring to the table. It's very well organized. And the quality is there as far as your shows and everything. Like, when I go to others, like we do a lot of different festivals. I bump into you guys a lot. People know what they're getting when they go to a bearded company show. So that's incredible.
Yeah. And I mean, it was, you know, once we did, God, I don't remember where we went. We did Chicago Improv Festival, and we paid to do, I don't remember what it was, but it was like, over the festival, you could get a coach for your ensemble for that festival. And we did that because we're like, we need this. We need to get some more coaching. And so we met up with Kevin Mullaney, and he was our coach. And it opened our eyes to true long form improv and how much of that we didn't even realize, like as theater students and people that love doing like scripted plays, that, oh man, long form for us was almost easier because it's like, oh, we're just telling a story. It's just like a play. Great. Let's do this. Right. This is what we should focus on.
Yeah. That must have rung a truth bell. And because aren't all, like you said before, most of you or all of you are acting like students and stuff. That's awesome. At this time, how is this still are the members of the Beard Company that you are with at the Chicago Festival, are we still have the same members now, or
so we've gone through a few different phases of members, and our first group was 7 of us, and that was through that time there was just the 7 of us, and then very shortly after that we added 3 more members, and then then we split off. We moved from Fargo Moorhead. Some of us went to LA and some people went to Minneapolis. The LA folks kind of just weren't doing bearded stuff out there, but the Minneapolis group was. And then at one point, my partner in crime, Matt, he moved from Minneapolis to LA and kind of reorganized them. And so now there's been a group in LA and Minneapolis.
That's incredible. Wow. Okay. Awesome. So you start with short form. When is it after the Chicago Festival? Is that when you started getting more, I don't know, I want to say niche-y, but like you have more stylistic shows?
Absolutely. That's exactly what it was, because we were still at that time, we were in, that was like 2007, 2008, somewhere in there. And it was right around that time we had just set up weekly shows at this coffee shop that we performed at in Fargo, and we decided to use those shows as basically an experimental ground for us to try stuff. And at that time we marketed our shows as experimental improv. You would come every week and you'd see something different. We would try every form we could. Wow. We made up forms. We tried things we read about. That's when we started trying to do like very genre specific things. It was a wild time.
I love those kind of I kind of miss that. I think, and I don't want to complain, but I feel like students have too much opportunity to get on like an improv stage now compared to when we were coming up. Like, a good coffee house or a good dive bar show.
Oh yeah,
like that really, that's a really great.
That stuff will teach you. That stuff will teach you for sure.
Yeah,
and it takes some real hustle to do that. I'm not even like trying to pat ourselves on the back or anything. I think it's hard, and sometimes you have to push outside your comfortability to like approach, like, because for us they didn't ask us, we approached them. We're like, we see you have this like extra room over here, can we use that for like performing once a week? We'll give you like $1 off of every ticket, and we were charging like $2 or something. It was wild.
Oh man, yeah. My first troupe played at a place called the Rusty Nail. That was some very formative times in my life. So I appreciate like just going out there. Like you said, it's a hustle, and it's a hustle that I don't think a lot of performers have to do. Well, especially last year, but like before that, like it's
definitely a different world, and not getting, it's
I don't want to sound like old man improv. Back in my day, we had to walk up the hill through the snow to do some zip zap zop.
But there's some things that are just different, especially if you're close to a city that has an improv theater or two. It definitely changes the dynamic, and like you just don't get a lot of, like, for us, and I'm sure same for you, like there's so many of those early shows for us. We had like 3 people actually watching us. Like, most people didn't care. We were doing it just because we wanted to.
Yeah. And 2 of those people are the girlfriends of the people on stage. Like, yep. Yeah, man. Okay, cool. So we're doing these shows. When do you guys get affiliated with the theater?
So when Matt and I decided to move to Minneapolis, he and I moved in 2010 down to Minneapolis, and that was right around when Huge Theater in Minneapolis was about to open. And we actually we contacted Butch, who is the executive director right now, and we kind of knew Butch through because we had come down and performed in Minneapolis a couple of times at a show called Improv, which is kind of a lottery show in Minneapolis. But we contacted Butch and we're like, hey, we're living here now. We heard you're opening a theater. We'd love to talk to you about it. So he weirdly grabbed breakfast with us. He doesn't even know us very well at that point. And he's like, yeah, sure, no problem. So we grabbed breakfast with him and he kind of told us about the plans for it. And we're like, okay, whenever you get a building, we want to be a part of it. Just keep us informed. Like, we want to help out however we can. And so the next year, Huge opened and we just signed up to do whatever. Like, we ran box office, we ran the bar, we did whatever we could. And we weren't even performing there. Like, we submitted to perform, but we didn't get chosen. Wow. And so we were still performing at like coffee shops and stuff around town, wherever we could, and just booking, random like after prom parties and like corporate events and stuff. And then
after prom parties?
Oh yeah. I mean, hey, those, I'm going to be honest, if anyone can get into those, just give it a shot. Especially if you're younger, just do it. They're great money. They're fun times. You get fed, taco in a bag or whatever.
Oh, so through the school, there's an after prom party.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I thought.
No. We're not going to like a house party. That would be very creepy. So now,
here's our town. We got to get an improv.
Somebody's going to clip this and think that we're psycho, creepy guys. Well, yikes.
Let's get a group of 20-somethings to come into the house and
that would be terrible.
Okay.
I don't condone that. But yeah, so soon after that, like, we just kept performing around town and we just kept bugging Huge. We just kept submitting and saying, like, we'd love to do this show. And finally we got in because we submitted with another group and we said, we want to do a show on Fridays at 10:30 at night or Saturdays at 10:30 at night. And we're like, we're going to submit with this group. Each group is just going to do a half of the show and that's it. Wow. And so each group got 25 minutes and that was it. Huge signed off on it. The other group within the first, I think, like month and a half of the run fell apart. And so we just took over the slot and then kind of just kept performing. That's awesome. We just worked our ass off just to get people to come out to a 10:30 slot.
Which is another thing people don't realize, like how many opportunities they present themselves because people just don't want to follow through. They don't realize the work. They enjoy the applause, the laughs, and everything, but it takes more than just showing up to put on a good show.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think there's so much work that is not the fun work of it, right? There's a lot of the behind the scenes stuff that is the work that usually is the thing that stops a lot of groups from getting further than they are. Yeah. And that's not saying the groups are not talented. There are so many talented groups and people out there. Oh my God. But it's doing all the work of just like we early on here in Minneapolis, when we were here, we literally made like sandwich board signs and like walked up and down the blocks in uptown Minneapolis, just trying to get people to come to our shows.
That's incredible. That's incredible. Let me ask you this. So when you guys started putting on these shows at, just the coffee houses or even when you got into the Huge, did you guys just come up with, I don't know, like a business plan, like, or a mantra or, just some kind of thing to like, these are our goals and this is how we're going to, I don't know, get them, I
think it's a great question. And my answer, unfortunately, is like, no, we didn't, which is probably why, realistically, it's probably why we're not further than we are. I mean, I think we've accomplished a ton. Like, I don't doubt that, but I think sometimes it has been like, we've changed that mission and mantra a lot over the years. I think it's become much more focused now within the last, I don't know, 6-7 years. But for a long time, it was just, we just want to perform. That's all. We just want to perform and try stuff. And once we kind of got past the stage of we're just doing experimental improv to, we really love the storytelling aspect of it. that's the kind of thing we want to do. We really want to do, I don't know how else to describe it other than like true unscripted theater. And I think that's just because we're big theater nerds that we started really liking that. And we're like, oh man, we could actually just, let's just try to actually do shows that we're not we know they're going to be funny, but we're not going to necessarily market them that way. I mean, a lot of the ads you see for our shows and stuff, almost very rarely do we advertise that they're like a comedy.
Yeah. Which is smart because, I think people expect almost whose line is it anyway type show when you say improv, because that's what most people are familiar with who are not improvisers themselves. They don't know your person off the street doesn't know the difference between short form and long form. It says comedy on the building. They expect, almost a laugh per minute, like stand up. And if you're telling a story, even like, I don't know, every great comedy, you have to have a low point to build, to build up that tension. So
absolutely. Yeah. It makes those moments stand out more, which is something that I find personally gratifying. Like, as much as I love getting laughs from the audience. That's an amazing feeling. That'll never go away. However, for me, I get almost as much excitement, if not more, when the audience is like so silent because they are so laser focused and invested in what's happening at that moment. That is wild when you can just feel that tension and energy coming from the audience. Yeah.
Right. My favorite moments are if you can get them to go, "Aw." Like
absolutely.
Then you did something there.
Yes.
Yeah. Cool. So we start with Hughes, and at this point, how long from getting the show at Huge to splitting up into two separate?
It was a few years because we started, Huge opened in 2011, and we started performing there mid to late 2011.
Okay.
And then when the LA Beards happened, Matt moved in 2014. So we had a few years at Huge where it was
the LA Beards. I love that.
And then Matt moved out there and he's like, half of the original group is out here. Right. I'm just going to push these guys together again. And so they started performing out there. And that was what a weird experience to think that I am part of an improv group that has we don't own a building. We're not Second City or any of that stuff, but we have two groups. But
it's a theater company. That's a really great, because then you don't have to pay for all that overhead or anything. Like you just, let me ask you this. Do you have, as a group, like a playbook as far as, workshops and shows and everything? You do?
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's amazing.
We have been building those over the years. And I think that's something we really learned while we were early on at Huge, is that what's going to help us actually grow or just be more successful is just to have stuff that we consider ours, like that we can fall back on and use, and that is more uniquely ours, rather than saying like, we teach this person's style or whatever. So we have a whole bunch of workshops that are very uniquely ours that we've created, and we've taught a lot of them at festivals and privately, and just here we've done a couple intensives in Minneapolis for groups, because we focus now. Most of our workshops focus pretty heavily around narrative improv.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I'm very familiar with your D&D improv. I think that's the show I've caught the most just by which is an idea that's solely yours guys, right? That's
Yeah. We pretty early on, actually, that was our first truly, like, where we really dove into, we're going to make an extremely genre specific show. Right. And at that time, literally none of us had ever played D&D. We just were like, we just were like,
okay.
We feel like this is such a great vehicle.
Absolutely.
Right? And so we practiced it. Like we decided, okay, well, we have to play D&D first. So we found a dungeon master and we played some D&D figured it out. And then we had to figure out, okay, how do we dumb this down so it's not hard for an audience that may not know D&D to get and understand and like, hopefully.
Okay, that's awesome. So this would be considered like a mid-form show, right?
Yeah, I would say it's probably, I mean, and it's changed. This show is actually probably out of our genre shows, this is probably the one that has changed the most over the years. It's evolved a lot as we've learned that some things work, some things don't. How can we make it clip along better or more understandable for people? But we have other genre shows as well that are very specific genres. So,
all right, we have a question from Kurt. Core tenets of improv include yes and also nobody being in charge. Where areas collaborate, storytelling games, D&D, contain an element of one person being in charge of the story and no because. It's a long one. I know because your troupe incorporates the two in your improv D&D. How do you do it so well? So how do you do that?
I mean, it's a great question, and it is that's something that we have recognized is that in a traditional D&D game, your game master, whoever they are, they're really running the show. It's much more of the adventure they are trying to take you through, right? And for us, we recognized obviously as a group, we are just kind of collaborative to, I don't know, I wouldn't say it's a fault, but we just love collaborating. We want everyone's ideas. And so we've worked with a few different dungeon masters at this point, and each of them, basically the criteria we had for them when we brought them in was saying, yes, we want your storytelling abilities, but we also want you to kind of be a part of the show as much as we are. So it's a little give and take. Like if we change something, if the story isn't going exactly where you want it to, we want you to be able to roll with that. And we've gotten very lucky. We've had our game masters have been all great about that, of being able to understand that improv truly is a form that you need to all be giving and taking. Otherwise, if our game master ran the entire thing, it would be so much more boring for us. Like, how much improv would we really get to do?
It'd be more of a Mad Lib.
Absolutely. So for us, it's our game master is improvising as much as we are. He our current one, he has an idea every before every show. He has an idea, and he tells us often that usually by the end of that show, he's like, that went almost nowhere. I got one thing accomplished that I thought I was going to get accomplished. So
wow. So were you guys were you guys familiar with mid-form before you started this process, or is it something you started the process and someone's like, oh, we do this over here, it's called mid-form? Or
I think that's more of what it is. I mean, I think that's been our entire adventure as a company.
That's awesome.
We go somewhere and somebody else tells us, oh, this is what you're doing. Because I remember really early on at festivals, somebody was telling me, we got off stage and somebody's like, wow, you guys just did the perfect Herald. And all of us looked at each other like, okay, great. Awesome. That is not what we were attempting to do, but I'm glad we did that.
I love that. And then we try to do it on purpose, and it was rough. No,
exactly. I mean, truly, that's basically the case.
All right, we've all been there, man. Great.
Absolutely.
So let's talk about the podcast. I just started watching it. I love it. So, how did it get started?
So we've been wanting to do a podcast for years, but it was just always like none of us felt comfortable enough with all the technical things to make it operate as well as we wanted. We're like I said, we're kind of too particular, I think, sometimes, because we just want things to work as well as they can. We don't, not that any group wants to do a crappy show, but I think we are especially hard on ourselves sometimes in our group. We just want the product to be as good as it can be. But in the past year, or like right before the pandemic happened in 2019, we had just added a new member here in Minneapolis, Maria. And she actually, one of her regular jobs is being a podcaster. She has she has a Magic the Gathering podcast, Good Luck High Five. And when she came into the group, she's like, we really should make this a podcast. We should just do this. And so we said, okay, fine. We're going to give it a shot. Let's record one and just see how it goes. So we recorded one in early January 2020, not knowing the pandemic was coming. And we're like, oh, this was actually really fun. Let's keep doing this. So we recorded a few more, and then the pandemic happened. And weirdly, what weird, like, timing, like kind of perfect timing for us, because we were able to record separately during the whole thing. But it was mostly just because we love doing our D&D show, that we're like, this show just seems like it could easily translate. Out of all the shows we've done, all of our genre shows, the D&D one is the one that just translates most perfectly into a podcast.
And the name of it's Break the Dice, right?
Break the Dice. Yeah. That show has gone through.
I should have started with that. I'm like the guy, like, oh, everybody meet my new friend. I'm not going to tell you his name.
I mean, honestly, everyone would be confused anyway, because our show, if you've ever seen any of our live shows, our D&D show literally was Dungeons and Dragons, the Improvised Campaign. Then it was Swords and Sorcery, the Improvised Campaign. Now it's Break the Dice. So it's gone through about a million things. But yes, you can find it, Break the Dice, the Improvised Campaign. It's on all the streaming platforms. But yeah, it just weirdly really worked out. And it's a form that made the most sense to translate into a podcast.
Okay. For those of the people who are trying to translate their shows onto podcasts, what are some of the things you learned, things we can avoid, or things that actually really helped?
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of it is truly knowing your form as well as you can. I mean, I know that sounds very simplistic, but for us, like, I think if we weren't as familiar with what we were doing, it would have seemed a lot sloppier. So the more you can tighten it, the better. And I think a lot of people are like, oh, we should have, like, our show should be an hour or whatever. No. If your show works best at 25 minutes, just do 25 minutes. I would rather listen to somebody's podcast that's really great for 25 minutes than somebody's podcast that's mediocre at an hour, like, and we've said that plenty, even with our show, that we're like, we decided early on, we're like 45 minutes, that's our max. Like, we're not going longer than 45 minutes. Doesn't make sense to. Yeah. So if you listen to our podcast, the episodes are almost always right around 45 minutes, because we know that that's kind of where we're set. That's where we know we get the best quality and we can tell the whole story we need to.
So when you record, are you guys all together, or?
So we were originally, and actually that's another, like, tip, I guess, is if you can record together, please do it, especially for improv. I mean, if you're listening to this or watching this and it's, like, improv relies pretty heavily on that very quick action of reading somebody else or hearing them in the moment and answering. And for us, those first 3 episodes we recorded of the podcast were all in person. When you listen to the first one we recorded separately, oh my God, like, you could tell it was like weird pauses, and like it took us probably 2 episodes. Like, they weren't bad, but it took us a couple episodes to get used to, when you're recording over Zoom, it's like there's a delay that you have to wait for.
I don't even really enjoy doing podcasts, or not podcast. I'm sorry, improv sitting down. I learned that, like, if I'm doing any shows or anything over Zoom, I gotta stand up. Like, something about this position, and like doing the podcast sitting down, I'm totally fine because this is conversation. But I don't know, to get into character and stuff, I gotta move my body. Like, that's my muscle memory. Yeah. So and I honestly would think the goal would be trying to improvise and forget the microphone's there.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, and it is a thing of, you want to perform as much as you can like you would on stage. Really don't be, because I think it's easy in a podcast setting because you're sitting in a chair or whatever. Like, it's easy to be low energy, but it's like, you really do have to, it can be just as exhausting doing a podcast in some ways as it is performing on stage, because you're using a different kind of energy when you're sitting, because you're trying to exude the same kind of energy that you do when you're on stage. And so there's times when our podcast ends and I'm exhausted just because I'm like, God, I was working my ass off just to sound like I was really into it,
And then there's limitations. I don't know if you guys have bumped into this, having having the limitations of what Zoom can do. Like if you're having multiple people trying to talk at once, or like you're trying to do it like an audience type feel, like if you're doing a town hall type scene, it can be rough. It can be,
It really can. I mean, and I think that's where you take advantage of, there's so many teachers that teach the exercise that makes people have to actually like take a pause between each line so that you actually hear it and then you respond to it. That's kind of how Zoom, I think that's something that I've actually kind of liked with Zoom. And I think we all talked about it as a group at some point, that we're like, in some ways it does force you to stop and actually listen, because sometimes it becomes chaos. And you don't hear anyone because everyone's talking. And so we have had to remind ourselves a couple of times, like, hey, we need to be real careful about talking over each other because we're just missing stuff.
Right. And you don't know what's getting recorded sometimes. I don't know if you guys, do you guys record directly through Zoom, or do you use? We
record all separate tracks so that when we edit, so because people have asked us a lot, like, so how much do you edit out of your episodes? And actually, we really don't edit anything out of the episodes, except for if there are moments where like three of us are talking over each other, we'll just like mute two people so that you just hear one person. And we edit out all of the weird silences between lines.
No, it makes sense. It makes sense. I really like the animation on the Facebook, or not Facebook, I'm sorry, YouTube channel. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, like, so we pretty early on, we're like, we really need to get more people into the show, because it's, I mean, as you know, everyone has a podcast. Everyone, their mom has a podcast right now. And so we knew that was a challenge. We're coming into the podcast game really late. So how else can we also capitalize here? And so our dungeon master, Alan, he had a friend who's a videographer and animator, and his friend was like, yeah, I could absolutely do this. Like, if you want something. And so Alan's like, yeah, we would like to do like just short clips from our episodes, just to give people a little taste of what our podcast is. Right. So he's been creating little clips from all of our episodes as these little short animations, and they're super fun. I love them. Even the trailer for it, where he just took one picture and then animated just by highlighting the different characters in this without them moving. Absolutely. Was really cool. Like, what great production. And I think that's, just shows how much you guys care about your brand. Absolutely. And that, that brings in the audience within self, because, I can guarantee you a good show. I can guarantee you a great experience. That's what you are associated with, a good time. And that's what everybody wants when they come in to watch a show, right? Absolutely. I mean, and people, whether they realize it or not, audiences are just as much, even if they're only paying, $5 for an improv show or something, there's this unconscious thing that audiences still want a polished product in always, like they want to see that, oh, this group really takes it seriously. So if they find you online, it looks like you didn't just randomly throw up a page or whatever. Like, you put time in. Like, for us, we are probably real oddities, because we take maybe too much. We take that too far, and we really go for it. But we like that. We want to feel like when our audience interacts with us, whether it's seeing us on stage, listening to the podcast, or just visiting our website or our social media pages, that they feel like, oh, this group cares. Like, they work hard. They're trying to put out something good,
Yeah, I did a deep dive on your YouTube page, because we were talking about the audience experience and production. I love some of your old videos, the black and white ones where you guys were doing comedy, because I think that's where some troops miss out on opportunities, either not taking the time to really produce it, and maybe even, like you said before, like taking just some bits of it so people can get almost making your own trailer for your improv troupe, rather than, I don't know, having someone in the back record a set and just sticking the setup there. Because recording in a theater is difficult. The sound's wonky. I mean, it's so often.
How often does that translate really well?
It does not. You have to be in the room, like, and people, I think, subconsciously are so used to seeing, like, especially like on with comedy, like a well-polished movie or something like that, and you're getting compared to $1 billion budget when it's just someone like myself, like recording with a handy cam in the back of the theater. Like, it's not the same. You can't compete.
Absolutely. And so, I mean, I think some of it does come down to, what can you do with the tools you have? And for us, I mean, for a long time, like we're lucky now that we have Maria in the group because she has a very deep video and audio background. So she's really helpful with that stuff. But before she was in the group, I mean, almost all of our stuff was just shot on like an iPhone or something. Like all of our like anything we've done.
Those old flip cams, that used to be a big one.
Exactly. So I mean, we're just like, you know what? This is what we have, and we're gonna do something because why not? It's not gonna hurt us.
Right. I think she's responsible for my favorite character so far, Crabapple.
Oh yeah.
That was episode 2.
Yeah.
Don't fall asleep on that. That's awesome. All right, cool. So is there anything else you've been working on you want to talk about? Or
I mean, I think a lot of it is just we're working on trying to just figure out what those next steps are. And I think that's probably all improv groups right now. We've been working, I'm sure a lot of people can probably recognize or understand the feel of like, okay, so now that the pandemic has opened up this digital space more, what does that mean? And that's what we're trying to figure out is, okay, we've done a few like one-off Break the Dice live shows on Twitch, and those have been weird but fun. I think
you just described 2020 in one sentence.
Yeah, exactly.
As far as performing is concerned,
Oh yeah. I think what we've learned from those is, again, those come down to production value.
Right.
Like if you're able to at least put an overlay over your video, how much better it seems just that much better, even if the improv wasn't the best you've ever done. Like at least it looks pretty good.
Well, it shows you're trying.
Yeah,
it really does.
Yeah. Absolutely. But I think the biggest thing we're working on is just Break the Dice as a podcast. That's awesome. Because we haven't been able to perform in person. We've really honed in on just saying, you know what, 2020 was about working our ass off on our podcast and seeing what we can do with that.
And like you said, everybody and their mom has a podcast.
Oh yeah.
Which makes me think if and you can answer, you don't have to answer it, but Joe, if your parents were to have a podcast, what would it be about?
Oh God. If my dad was to have a podcast, it would be a very boring, no offense to my dad if he's watching at all. He would probably have a podcast about city leadership, because that's what he does. He works with cities and their leadership, which would be very boring to me. And my mom, for all, if she could understand technology better, it would absolutely be something on gardening for sure.
Oh, wow. My mom could co-host that with her. That and what British television mysteries are on Netflix would be my mom's niche. Yeah, she really gets into that. Yep. And my dad would be like, where's to find the cheapest gas? That would be, it'd be really short.
I love it.
It'd be about 10-minute episode, because when I get my phone calls like, Bobby, in Novi, which is a city a little bit, you drive 40 minutes this way to fill up your tank to save 3 cents. It's worth it.
I guarantee that podcast would be a hit. People love that.
There's a demographic for that.
Oh yeah.
Awesome. Joe, thank you so much for coming out. I really appreciate you and your time, man. I miss you, buddy. I think the last time we saw each other was Cincinnati, right?
Yeah. So like almost 2 years ago.
I know.
Isn't it wild?
Honestly, it feels like yesterday.
I mean, I'm missing those moments of getting to interact with the larger improv community. Holy cow.
I think I was okay during the overall, pandemic until like Diff weekend. And that kind of get me, because my favorite thing during Diff is I love the shows. I love the workshops, all that cool stuff. But just walking down the street and seeing like improv friends and like, oh, you're eating here? I'm about to eat here. Like, I don't know why, but I love those moments.
I totally agree. I think a lot of what the fun is of festivals and why I try to encourage other groups to do them is not the performance. I mean, the performance part is great. And the workshops are great. but man, it's just getting to hang out with other people that love the same thing you love, and just like being humans together. Eating and talking and I don't know, everything.
Absolutely. Great. So where can we find the podcast? Everywhere, or is there a specific place you would like us to go to get more hits? Or
I mean, now you can find it anywhere. All the regular podcast places, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever. Find it. You can go to btdpod.com. That'll give you quick links to everything and give you a little more info about the show.
And you guys have your own website as well.
Yeah, beardedcompany.org.
Cool. And people should check that out. There's some good stuff on there. I had to stalk you before this, man. I had to get my research.
I love it.
Which is great. Like, this was a really easy podcast to do because you guys put it all out there. I appreciate that, man. That's really cool. Again, thank you so much, Joe. Appreciate you, man. You have a good one. Everybody, thank you so much. If you want to include what kind of podcast your parents would do in the comments, we really like to check that out. And we're also going to put all the information for the Bearded Company in our comments, and so check them out as well. See you next week. Have a good one, everybody.
Bye, y'all.
And I'm ending the